Hey there, my name is Julie. In case this is the first video that you're watching, I usually just kind of talk about spiritual topics. Sometimes I ramble into a reading. I kind of use it as a video journal a little bit sometimes, and I document a lot of my process. And that's actually kind of what I wanted to talk about in this video. I had got together with a friend recently who wants to hang out because we can talk about spiritual stuff, which is great, right? Because I like talking about this stuff. So he sort of inspired me to share this perspective that I have. It's not anything to do with the conversations we had. It was just something I realized as a result of our conversations. We're very different, both spiritually minded and based, but really have been focused on different topics in spirituality. So anyhow, I wanted to talk a little bit about why I do what I do and what I'm doing. When I share anything that I share. First and foremost, it's usually for myself, right? Because when I express externally, I get to see myself. And most of my earlier on videos, before maybe a month ago or so, maybe 2, I don't remember. Whenever I started posting again, things had shifted for me a little, but everything prior to that was basically about me expressing. And then I thought it would be nice if a side effect of me expressing my process, documenting my process, would be helpful to someone else. But I want to say this, a lot of the stuff I've shared, including readings, including the feelings series, including the activate and reprogram series, all of this stuff is just meant to be a reflection. So it's not about, my channel isn't about me telling you what to do, but I think a lot of my videos could come off that way. And maybe because I did feel that way at certain times, and that's been one of the shadows that I've talked about, along the way, why I had that in my shadow. It's one of the things I uncovered about myself was that I didn't really trust people to handle themselves. So it was my way of trying to be in control of the situation or whatever. But that was just an echoing wound from my childhood when I was the only one. I was the oldest child in a war zone. A war zone. I'm trying to be more articulate with my speech as well. I noticed that sometimes I mumble, sometimes I trail off my words, and I don't articulate all of the words. And that is very annoying. And I don't want to waste your time. Sometimes I watch my videos and I think, wow, I'm talking about a lot of nothing and it's not beneficial to others because it's just rambling. So I'm going to work on those things. Starting now with this video where I've noticed that I started to mumble again and maybe ramble too. I don't know that I can completely go cold turkey on the rambling. But basically, I just wanted to sort of share that my intention is that the things I share be a reflection for you. Meaning, I'm not telling you what to do. Everything that I say, even if it seemed like I was telling you what to do, I'm always inviting you to reflect on the information as if like you are the authority on you, and you get to say or decide or feel whatever you feel in response to that, and that lets you have information about you. Sometimes you may agree with the advice that I've given or the conclusion that I've made, and sometimes you may not. And all of that is okay. It still allows this channel and my sharings to be a tool for you. You, as a human being, having your own experiences with your own perspective. The only thing I can share is my own, and it's never meant to invalidate yours or your experiences. The basic thing that can be gleaned from what I'm sharing is the tools that I'm using to share it with. I've shared some tools, different ones, over the years. Some of them are readings. I like readings because I like when I can tap into an energy and just sort of like let it flow through me and just feel that feeling of being in the flow. That feels good to me. So I have enjoyed that method. But bear in mind, whatever information is coming, it's like you reflect on how that sits with you. Because even though that feels good to me, so I channel it because it feels good and that feels like a truth to me, you will have to know what feels like truth to you to discern whether that is true for you, right? And sometimes I think, oh, maybe I should have been better at sharing disclaimers at the beginning of my videos. Because if you don't watch every video, and I only talk about it now and then you may not realize that that is what I'm doing, that is my intention, that's what I'm inviting you to do, is to use it as a reflection tool. And other modalities that I've shared, like soul retrieval, like telling a new story, like activating, like doing shadow work. I may have even done a little bit of energy medicine. I think there's at least one mediumship reading on my channel. It's not my favorite thing to do. A lot of it is just me sharing my own experience and what I did with the experience that I was having. But what it comes down to is we're all here as humans having experiences. I have utilized astrology as well. That's another tool that I've shared. And human design and the Hermetic principles. None of these things are required to know about or use to get through life. But these become valuable tools when you deem them to be. So my impression that I have of others is that sometimes other people find themselves on what they may call a spiritual journey. It's a way to say that the experiences they are having feel like an expansion of awareness, and that seems like they're opening to know more, to feel more, to be in touch with and know their connection to spirit. And when that happens, these tools become helpful. I have not seen these tools be very interesting or desirable to people who are not on a spiritual journey. And I'm using quotation marks with my fingers when I say spiritual journey because you don't necessarily need to call it that. I'm just using words to describe an experience that some people may or may not be having. And that can be defined for themselves. You know if those tools are interesting to you or not, right? But I'm acknowledging that these tools are not going to be interesting to somebody who is not having that bigger awareness. So if these tools were presented to me earlier on in my journey of life, before I was spiritually focused, before I even understood anything about spirituality, I wouldn't understand the point. I wouldn't even know why it was being presented as a tool for what. And I have noticed that there are some people on a spiritual journey who maybe are not aware of the tools that are available out there. And so that is why sharing can be very helpful. A lot of what I've come to is a piece of this, a piece of that, through my experimentation, connecting dots between things that other people said and putting it in a context that worked for me, creating experimental rituals or processes and habits in order to find out if these things were worthwhile. And at different times, each of the ones that I've shared have been worthwhile for me, and that's why I'm sharing them. We are not the same. We don't have an exact same journey, but sometimes some of those tools may be helpful for you as well. In particular, the formula that I have shared about doing shadow work comes into play when you are delving into these spiritual topics, so-called remembering who you are. I don't think this is necessarily true for everyone. I don't have any proof that everyone in the world will benefit from using the formula that I share for doing shadow work. However, the formula that I use for doing shadow work is based on the way that I understand energy moves. And the reason that I have put together that formula is because it allows the energy to move through the places where it usually gets stuck and causes us to re-experience something that we are here to learn about. In some cases, it's very beneficial for us to re-experience something that we're here to learn about because we have not yet learned what we need to learn from it, from the experience. So then we have the experience again. At some point, we may have had an experience and we don't want to have that experience anymore. Maybe it's a very unpleasant experience. And at that point, the tools can become very valuable. Alternatively, if we are not on a spiritual journey, we can fall into a victim mindset at that point. We can feel powerless to change a pattern that has been repeating in our life. an experience that we keep having that has been causing us pain, discomfort, or limiting us, if we don't know that there are tools for us to use to move through that, then it seems to be that humans can fall into a victim mindset, feeling victimized by life, feeling victimized by the experiences, the circumstances, or whatever else they attribute the experience to. It might be other people in some cases. Sometimes I talk about this life that we're living, these lives that we're all living, as part of a divine orchestration. And I think that's true. And I think that we are the divine creators of our experience. And I think that the experience is interactive with us and responds to us. And I think the astrological birth chart is the energy that we are here to experience with and through. We are much more than that energy, but that is what energy we are experiencing with and through in this incarnation. Hold on one sec, I have to cough. So everyone has a unique birth chart. So everyone is experiencing a life that is unique. And therefore, I believe what feels like the truth to me is that we are experiencing the energy that we're meant to, and that is what we're here to do. And that when we have learned all that we can or meant to from that energy, that we then transcend it. We put ourselves in a neutral state with regard to it so that we can easily navigate it and discern. With the wisdom we gained from having experienced it. Now, that means everyone has a different thing that they're learning from the same experiences sometimes. And if we have found that we solved something for ourselves and then we see someone else experiencing it, it doesn't mean that they should solve it the same exact way we did. They might be trying to learn something different about it. A moment. Now I have to blow my nose. You can get clues from someone's birth chart about what they might be trying to learn from the situation, but it would always be most resonant within them about the truth for them, right? So there really is nothing for us to say about each other's experiences being right or wrong. The experiences that each person is having can't be right or wrong, according to us, only according to them. We can have something we prefer, we can take distance from people we love based on the experiences that they're having and how they're affecting us, but we can't decide for somebody else whether they need to have that experience or whether they should solve it the way that we decided or not. That is all that's all like intel that comes from within them, in their heart, their curiosity, and this inner urge will lead them to that, right? Their soul's calling. What were they trying to learn from that experience? So, therefore, it's it's really important that we are discerning, that we are just using the tools and the information other people give us and share with us as a reflection, something to reflect on. We should let ourselves be sovereign. That means taking responsibility for ourselves, deciding for ourselves, discerning for ourselves. You know, I'm not saying that means we should never help other people. These are two separate things, right? And I'm not saying that we should never get help from other people. Also not what I'm saying. It means that you don't let yourself be in a pattern of looking to other people to solve everything before you've even checked in with yourself to see if you can solve it. And if you do find yourself in a pattern like that, that's some information for you. Maybe that's a situation you're trying to learn from. If it's been a pattern and you'd like to stop it, then that's where the tools come into play. Like, oh, we can use some tools to find out what the root cause is of this. One moment. That time I just had to adjust how I was sitting. Okay, so you have a bunch of experiences, right, in life. And you come to a point and maybe some of those experiences were very unpleasant, whatever. They're in the past, so you're moving forward with your life. Maybe you find yourself with a bunch of coping mechanisms, or maybe you're not even aware that you would call any of the ways that you operate a coping mechanism. Because the energy that we are here to experience with and through exists, and that we are likely here to learn something from it, from having the experiences of it. If we misunderstand it, what we were meant to learn, the energy stays lodged in us. If we can't fully process it, if we're too overwhelmed to fully be present with the experiences that we've had in the past, then those experiences get lodged in us. Now, humans have a few different ways of coping with that. And suppression, repression, denial, rejection are all ways that humans can deal with something that they have not been able to be present with, meaning they were not able to process fully the experience they were having, that they were meant to have, that they came here to have. And basically what happens is that experience gets thrown forward into their future so that they will eventually have the experience again. Some people might call this a trigger, because a lot of times this is how it happens. It becomes something that you'll get triggered into later. Maybe again and again rapidly. The more often you get triggered on a certain thing, if you're rapidly getting triggered on it, it's showing up for you and you're getting bothered by it again and again, it's usually because your soul is asking you to resolve that now. So it's putting it in front of you, putting it in front of you. So these experiences can accumulate if we have not processed them through. All the experiences we have, that we have not yet processed the data as we meant to when we came in to have that experience, if we've not neutralized ourselves on the energy, if we've decided something in an extreme way, like, oh, I got my heart broken, now I'm simply not going to be in a committed relationship, I'm going to play the field. So that is an extreme, right? And it's made from the place of I'm hurt and I don't want that. And that is why the experience will keep coming up in your reality, giving you new chances to look at it again, a new chance to decide about it, until you come back into neutrality on it, because it is a completely different thing to decide that you don't want to be committed from a neutral space. The neutral space says it's not good or bad. It's a decision I'm making, and I know that I have options here. And you might think that it's the same way you decided when you decided not to from a hurt place. But if you're still in the hurt and you haven't been present fully with the hurt in order to allow yourself to come into neutrality on it, then the hurt lodges it in as the experience, so it's unprocessed. You have to be able to be with the pain. Whatever overwhelming experience that you're having needs to be processed, and that is done through presence. The pain is often amplified by the story we're telling. And we may actually compound and break our own hearts if we're telling ourselves that we'll never love again. That's not my complete point, so let me get back on track here. Okay, so if we accumulate a backlog of these experiences, right, there comes a time where we may be coping a lot so that we don't have to deal with them. We might be using distractions. We might develop addictions. We might just be doing things that are, because we would be doing it to cope with avoiding those things that we have not processed through, and because it's in the subconscious, we might be causing ourselves or others harm with the coping mechanism that we're using, which is a lot of the time the reason that someone wants to look at and change a pattern. It's because they realize that it's hurting them or someone else. So it gives you reason to look back and say, why am I doing this, right? So processing through all of the unprocessed experiences that we've had until we're caught up puts us in a position to be present with our experiences as we have them. And for me, the process of processing the backlog of unprocessed stuff got me very comfortable with the tools that I needed in order to process in real time. So once I was caught up, I could be in presence until it was time for me to do something else that wasn't like part of the pile up backlog, maybe something that was more buried, and now it's time to do it. And I'm in presence, and I'm not overwhelmed, so I can process this in real time. Because we're not meant to just process everything at once. This is a lifetime experience, right? It's happening over time. Sometimes it's not time to fully relieve ourselves from a pattern of repeating an experience. Sometimes we need to have more time with that loop of energy, with that set of experiences, so that we can see a bigger picture view, or that we experience ourselves in the extremes of it. And if we're doing that, it is an indication that we're attempting to master something within that. If we're experiencing the extremes of something, it's probably likely that we are attempting to master something within that experience. And we are getting to know all of the angles that we need to know. So the formula that I share allows us to be bringing our energy into the 0 point, into where all possibilities exist, so that we're not stuck in a coping mechanism anymore. We're in presence, and we are in discernment within that place of presence, meaning within presence we're in that flow state, and we can feel if something is off. We won't make decisions that don't align with us. So we will not create new patterns of unprocessed experiences as often. And we will easily notice when there is something for us to process, because it will be active in our field. And when we're all caught up on the backlog of stuff that we hadn't processed, the field is much more clear. You know what's there, you feel what's there. So when something comes up to be processed, you know it. And this presence is a presence with all that is, with the divine creation. This is being at the right place at the right time. This is having the genius idea. This is lining up with and seeing the reflection back of yourself immediately of everything you're putting out. It's like noticing it all. Because your mind is freed up. Your observer is freed up from dealing with that overwhelm. And now you're noticing the presence, the present moment. And that's why it's desirable to use the tools to alleviate yourself from the loops when there are loops to be alleviated, when it's time to do them. Because personally, when I was unprocessed, right, before I understood any of this, I was pretty miserable. I was overwhelmed, I was lashing out, I was constantly being triggered, I was too scared to live, I was totally anxious, I was depressed, I was suicidal, I couldn't keep my shit together, I was feeling traumatized, I was feeling unloved, and I was just constantly wanting to end my life. Because I was so basically separated from myself, because I was looping so many experiences that I wasn't able to process, because I had absolutely no idea that what I was doing was trying to process experiences as a human on Earth. I was too busy trying to survive Earth because I grew up in a war zone. In my family home, there were violent outbursts quite often, is what I mean when I say I grew up in a war zone. And this sense of unsafety colored all of my experiences because my body adopted that as one of the things that it couldn't process. And there were a lot of misunderstandings that I had to clear up about that, like whether it meant I was worth anything or not, whether I was worth knowing, spending time with, caring about, prioritizing, because all of those things did not happen in my experience. And there were, misunderstandings left and right about the whole thing. Like if you just picture like the conclusions that a child would have to make when they're in a household like that, those become the beliefs. And when you live out these beliefs, it just compounded, and over again, experiencing the feeling of being unloved and being unsafe and all this over and over again. For all those years, it had weighed on me to the point where I just was too tired, right? I didn't know that there was even a solution because I was feeling like a victim to life and to the experiences that I had, right? So I wouldn't have even began to do any of this until I was introduced to the spiritual concept of the law of attraction. And I've definitely heard some spiritual teachers shy away from it. And I think it's because it can be a bit of a trap in some ways. However, it saved my life because when I heard about the law of attraction being that you live out what you attract, what you believe, your thoughts create your reality, I started looking at my thoughts. Prior to that, I had never looked at my thoughts. I just thought I was my thoughts. I just thought this is my, I'm thinking this because I'm observing my reality, and it all sucked. When I looked at my thoughts, I noticed that it were a lot of negative thoughts. It was a lot of negative thoughts. And then I thought, well, if it's true that my thoughts create my reality, and I'm very unhappy in my reality, maybe I should try changing some thoughts to see if that's true. And I started wrestling my thoughts one by one to change them. And some of them were returning over and over again to be wrestled again and again. And when I mean wrestle, I mean I would take the thought, I would notice it was negative, and then I would turn around and think of the opposite and look for ways that the opposite was also true. Could always find a way that the opposite was also true. And when the thoughts would come back and I would have to wrestle them again, I noticed that it wasn't all of the thoughts that would do that, only some of them. And that's how I noticed there was patterns. There was repeating loops of certain energies, and those took longer in order to alleviate, to change. And that's how I started on my journey of paying attention to my experience, which at that time was just a bunch of negative thoughts. So years go by, I clear up more and more, I get better at this, and then eventually come to the place where I definitely don't want to die. Not until it's time, and it won't be for a long while. And I'm sure glad that I didn't give up, because things are much different now, right? I don't have all of that with me anymore. I was able to fully resolve those patterns. And I don't have thoughts haunting me. And if I do have something that comes up, I know, oh, that's something to heal. And I get out my toolbox in my mind of, oh, what am I going to do to deal with this? Most times it's the formula that I have talked about on my channel, which is acknowledge, validate, accept, and be present with. Most of the time, that is what I use these days to resolve my issues. And when I process it through, I experience the relief of not having that as a pressing issue anymore. It's no longer like muddying up my clear, calm self, And I know that I have successfully moved that energy, moved myself with respect to that energy, become the version of myself who could handle that, meaning processed my experience. And so now I'm able to process my experiences much more effectively and efficiently because I practice the tools over and over again. And that's why I share the tools. I share the tools because it worked for me. And it worked for me in the case of there's patterns that I don't like, there's experiences that I'm having that I don't like, there's behaviors that I'm doing that I don't like, there's feelings that I'm having that I don't like. And it's weighing me down so much that I just don't want to do this anymore. So I figure if it works on the stuff that made me want to die, and it works on the stuff that's just mildly annoying, it's worth sharing. And I also noticed that, I sort of went all in on the process of doing this for myself. When I realized I could change my beliefs to change my reality, when I realized I could stop thinking negative thoughts and have a better experience of life, that's all I wanted to do, because I was desperate to feel different. And it turned out that there's a lot of layers of this stuff. And I did it, all day, every day for a long, long time. And I'm so glad I did, but like, I'm just saying, like, it was time consuming. It did take a lot, and I didn't take any shortcuts, and like, I really, really did have to balance out a lot of stuff, a lot of misunderstandings, like, just totally, like, wow, on the number of misunderstandings that I was having, and also negative beliefs and patterns and things like that, coping mechanisms. And so now that I have, it's a much more pleasant experience. I want to share it. I've noticed that other people don't necessarily go all in all day, every day on doing this kind of stuff. And that's okay, right? But I noticed that it's one of the experiences that I'm meant to have, is to focus on it a lot, to do it enough to become really good at it. And that's what I've done. And I would say my energy supports that, right? If you look at my energy, my birth chart, or use one of the tools to decipher my energy's kind of defined this way, of wanting to do this, wanting to delve in this way, deep, on a deeper level, into the subconscious, and just to use my mind to alleviate the patterns and to kind of figure it all out. Like, that was a pleasant experience for me, but that might not be a pleasant experience for other people. Other people might feel it's like it's a chore, So I've been developing something that will help people, as far as like providing a little bit of hand holding that might help in those moments where you might forget that there's a tool, that you could use a tool to get free from whatever is ailing you. Some upset or some repeating thought or anxiety or depression. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not making claims for that way. I'm just saying I know something that worked for me, and I can offer to share that information with others now, and I'm glad to do it. But hold on, I just thought of something that was important to mention. Hold on, I gotta shift how I'm sitting, and hopefully I'll think of it. One sec. Okay, I thought of it. So the other thing to keep in mind is the reason why I thought people might benefit from a little bit of hand holding is because when we get triggered into one of those experiences again, hold on, I'm going to clear my throat. When that loop plays out again, when the experience comes again, we go back to the mindset and the age that we were when that experience first got lodged in us as something that will repeat. Is that something that we're studying? So there's something about the age that it first happened was important for us to experience it at. And that might not be the best wording, because there are some pretty severe traumas that people would not like to hear me say that about. So I don't want you to be triggered, but if you are triggered, please promise to not hurt yourself or anyone else. And perhaps I'll put a bit of a trigger warning on this video, so that hopefully you knew that that was a possibility, and hopefully you are able to help yourself through that moment. But these triggers that we get into the experiences, they return us to the age we were when it first happened, and that means that we can forget that we have these tools, because the version of us that was that age when it first happened didn't have those tools and felt overwhelmed. And so that's what it feels like when we relive it each time. So what I realized is that over time I was developing a dual consciousness, where I was just very naturally always observing myself. Like, I am not the thoughts, I am the one observing the thoughts. And so when I had developed that, practiced so much, it was just natural for me to now see when I was triggered, and that part of me knew that I had tools. The observer part of me knew that I had tools now. The part of me experiencing the trigger, having the experience again, the same feelings, the same thoughts, the same panic, whatever it may be, was stuck in a smaller perspective and benefited greatly from this part of me that was able to go, no, we have tools. In the beginning of my process, I would even put signs on my wall, just like make myself a little sign to remind myself that I have tools if I get triggered. So it was sort of like digging myself out of like a big canyon, because it was like difficult. And even when I was aware of what was happening, that I was just getting triggered into a previous experience in order for me to process it, I could still lose myself in it in the beginning. Like if I got triggered, I could lose myself and then finally come out of the trigger and be like, oh, it happened again. You know? Like I'm talking, it took years of me doing this stuff for me to get really good at it. But it was so worthwhile. And it's important that, I didn't beat myself up when it didn't work out. Well, at first I used to. But then I learned that I can't beat myself up because this is just the process. This is just what it is. You know? Like I can barely remember what it was like to feel all those ways, but I do remember how unwanted and uncomfortable it was. And I do remember that it felt hopeless, it felt like I was a victim, and I do remember that had I not been desperate to stop it, I might not have ever started looking for those solutions, or even just taken a chance on a solution that was presented to me. The way that the movie The Secret, is how I learned about the law of attraction. The way that that was introduced to me was through a guy that I was chatting with online. He suggested it to me, and I've never been good at taking suggestions, to be honest. And then 3 years later, he suggested it to me again. 3 years later. And that is when I watched it. And to think that I could have started the journey 3 years prior is kind of crazy to me, because it did take so many years. But then again, I'm, not beating myself up. I'm gonna give it up to divine timing, and, like, I can only do the best I can do. And if I was not able to watch that, then I wasn't able. Maybe just knowing that it was suggested to me primed me for when it was going to be suggested again 3 years later, right? But we're all on our own timelines, so we can't dictate how fast or slow other people are going to go, right? So like that guy suggesting that movie to me, he didn't have any expectations of me. He didn't. And I think maybe that's probably why I watched it the second time, because it wasn't like he expected anything of me. And that's probably because the first time I didn't watch it either. So he was probably like, oh, she's probably not going to watch it anyway. Thank God I did. So glad I did. Yeah, so this is what I'm doing here. I'm just sharing some tools. It's good to have tools in our toolbox. I have been practicing, this process for a long time. And you'll see in some of even like my last video, I shared me going through the process completely on one of the patterns that I realized was still in me. And it's not because like that pattern was hidden behind something or whatever. It was just not time to deal with it until it was time, Until I had the capacity to notice it, then I couldn't do it, right? That's just what it is. And I'm a person who wants to do it. I want to notice. If someone triggers me, that is an absolute gift. and I will never say it's not anymore. Like, I'm sure I didn't like it before. Like, if someone were to trigger me, maybe I did blame them in the very beginning before I understood this process. Then I would stop blaming them, but I would still not like them. And then I was able to take it all back within me, take my responsibility more fully, and be a sovereign being and say, this is my feeling. This feeling isn't in them. The feeling's in me, you know? And now, what I work on is like being comfortable, happy, peaceful, despite whatever's going on out there, you know? That's where I'm headed. And it's not always easy, but sometimes it is. And that's unheard of for me, from where I came from, you know? Yeah. So, I will be offering a tool coming up for people who it interests. I'm excited about it. I've been working on it a lot, and it's not quite ready yet, but soon. So stay tuned.